All right, here goes. What up, dude? Just wanted to make this quick little thing for you. Give you, I think, like 3 different techniques that I found incredibly helpful to kind of break out of the just mindless kind of pentatonic thing. So first one being is learning like all your arpeggios through everything and being able to like practice them, or like incorporate them in a different chord progression. So like, your basic triad arpeggio is going to be, let's say we're in the key of G, is going to be 1, 3, 5, and then that repeats. So an exercise I like to do when I really started getting comfortable with this stuff, and make sure you always do it really, really slow, is just go through the chord progression, any chord progression, and just run those arpeggios really, really slow. So for example, this chord progression is going to be G, D, C, G, D. It's a very common chord progression, you'll hear it, but it goes a little something like this. This would be the exercise. 1, 3, 5. 1, 3, 5. Here's the chord change. 1, 3, 5. Now we're in D. 1. Now we're in C. And back to G. And to D for the turnaround. Now that was like very, very slow and very, very simple. Now you can kind of like expand on that and sort of, run them either as eighth notes, run them 2 octaves. So for example, so it's all based on those triad shapes, even though So I threw a couple little like linking tones in there, but that's all based off of just those triads. And you don't have to learn how to basically shred them or anything like that. It's just about being comfortable with what we call playing the changes. And that's a really good way to kind of help you learn how to play the changes of the chord progression, instead of just being okay, we're in G, I'll play G pentatonic, because there's a lot of stuff in, the natural key of G that if you play a 5 chord, D major in the key of G, let me see if I can find it, and you play straight G pentatonic over it without considering the fact you're in the key of G. Okay, so here would be the D chord. So you hear how it sounds, just straight D pentatonic or G pentatonic. It's fine, it works, it hits some of the right notes, but a lot of the notes it hits are really ambiguous. So it doesn't really sound necessarily like you're playing melodically or anything like that. So step 1, those arpeggiated things, really helpful. Just, especially with maybe more complicated chord progressions, being able to go through them, stuff like that, and just being able to get, even if it's just a 1, 3, 5 triad, being able to get that, it'll just get you a lot more comfortable with knowing where you are with the melody in comparison to the chord progression. You can also expand on that and do basically the 7th version of those chord forms. So in this key of G, we'd be working with G major 7, the 1 chord, the 5 chord, D7, the 4 chord, which would be C major 7 as well. 4 is major 7 in a major key, back to G. So that'd be a little something like this. And this is just a further kind of embellishment of it. So we get the hint there. So you can kind of, now those don't particularly sound great or like is necessarily a tool you want to use in soloing. It's just ripping through solos, but it helps you develop this idea of like basically like what I'll get into next, which is chord scale theory. So to expand upon the arpeggios, basically, now that we know 1, 3, 5, 7, we're just going to fill in all the other notes. And what we'll be doing then is following each chord based off of its chord scale. So this is where you get into like modes. And I know I'm going like 100 miles a minute. I just want to keep this video sort of short so it's not like super like intense all at once. But where we get into modes is where each corresponding chord in a scale, in a key, basically has its own scale that goes with it. So in the example of G, it's going to be, you know, and you can look up like modal theory and all, like you can look up the modes and practice them and work through them and everything, but this is just more conceptual stuff to like incorporate in your playing. So chord scale wise, we're looking at G. So that's going to be your G natural major scale. However you decide to play it, I don't care. It really doesn't matter. So your G natural major scale, or Ionian as it's called. So pretty simple, right? Major scale. Now we move on to that 5 chord, the D. Now we have what's called Mixolydian scale, which is the exact same notes as the G scale, but it starts off the 5th degree. Now you should learn these as if you're playing just off of that. You know, you don't want to be like, okay, I'll play G major, but start on D, because that's going to really screw your mind up when it comes to playing, you know, like actually implementing this stuff. So that would be, so G major, Ionian, D or D7. Missed a note in there, but anyway, so. So it fits nicely over that. C major. So this scale is a little bit different because it's actually called a Lydian scale, so it has a sharp 4. Otherwise, it's the exact same as the G Ionian scale. So it would go like. So it's kind of a little bit spooky, ambiguous, but that's what works over that 4 chord. So using all that in practice, we can end up with something like this. So that's just basically stringing together those arpeggios, those natural kind of, those chord scales that go with everything. And you notice one of the most important parts of that is making sure on the strong beat, so when the chord changes, you're resolving with a note that works with the chord. So here's an example of what, you know, and this concept too, it's like a lot of the notes that aren't in, so in G, it's G, B, D, G. There's other notes that will sound nice to resolve on, but just for the practice of it, focus on resolving on those chord tones, those 1, 3, 5. So, for example, that would sound a little bit something, if I were to do it the right way, it sounds like this. So it's resolving on D. Resolving on E, which is the 3rd of C. Resolving on the low B, which is the 3rd of G. So that's really good stuff to practice, resolving on those very specific chord tones. Now, the other trick that really helped me is like, so we got the arpeggios, we got doing the scale itself. So it's like, what else is left? Well, the notes in between. So on a any sort of major chord, a trick that I use a lot, so this progression obviously is like major chords, G, D, C, all major chords. A trick I use a lot is actually to utilize the minor third of the scale to resolve into either the third or the root. So what that's called is a leading tone. So it leads you into something that works. So this is probably like the most advanced area of this concept because we're actually playing notes that go outside of the scale. But it can actually really open you up to some cool tones, some cool tension release. So like here's a example of like kind of all of those techniques, especially I'm gonna really focus on using the minor to major third resolution. So you've probably heard like, so that right there, it's a double stop, but starts right there, and then go to the 5 chord. See, so I'm just doing that. I'm over exaggerating it. I would never do it that much, but that's just to further accentuate the idea. So this is kind of what it would sound like all with all those techniques together. Arpeggio right there. So you can throw in fast, for example there, throw in fast pentatonic licks, but you got to make sure to remember that you got to resolve on the next chord. You can't just shred through it because that's when it sounds like you're just playing random notes. So I went something like to resolve on that. So that's basically the like abridged version of everything. Obviously there's like a crap ton to unpack and work with there, but yeah, maybe that'll get you like at least like a little more open into kind of like the theory behind like being able to stretch out, especially across the fretboard. And like the sky's the limit, and when you start this stuff, do it super duper slow. Because when I started doing this and like being like, okay, like I'm combining all this stuff, I'm resolving on these certain notes, I'm doing this, my brain didn't have the ability yet to do it quick enough. So that comes, like you'll probably feel like I gotta think so much about it, oh my God, where's like the third of the, you know, but through repetition, all of that stuff comes. So yeah, there you go, man.